Thank you. Thank you much, Denise.
Call this evening's Transportation Authority of Marin Board of Commissioners meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. We'll start, I believe, with swearing in a new member.
Yes, good evening. Yes, thank you. We have with us here this evening, representing the city of Larkspur as a new alternate to the T.A.M. board, Kevin Haroff, and I would like to take this opportunity to welcome him and to issue the oath of office to Mr. Haroff. I, Diane Steinhauser, Executive Director of the Transportation Authority of Marin, do hereby certify that Kevin Haroff was appointed as a member of the T.A.M. Board of Commissioners at a regular meeting of the Transportation Authority held on Thursday, November 20th, 2014. Please repeat after me. I, Kevin Haroff, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California. That I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. That I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter. Thank you very much, Commissioner Haroff.
And welcome.
Thank you.
I would like to move now to the chair's report or comments. To begin with, I would like to thank the T.A.M. staff for setting up the ramp metering workshop for the public, and a special thanks to Bill Whitney for the poster boards, which worked very well. Also would like to announce our new ad hoc, our bike sharing ad hoc members, Madeline Kellner, Damon Conley, Stephanie Moulton Peters, Katie Rice, and John Reed, and thank them very much for stepping up. And that concludes my report. It's now time for Commissioner Matters not on the agenda. Yes, Pat.
Thank you very much, Chair Fredericks. The question that I was going to ask Caltrans and MTC, which I will do by phone and confirm with a letter, is I will ask them if they can send the cities a report 1 year after the ramp meters are implemented. So on the performance of the ramp meters in terms of what congestion relief has occurred, and then also the reduction in accidents, and if there's any impact on the local roads, so that then each of the cities can put that up on our website, and I will be making that request.
Is that something that is in the plan?
We're going to have to talk a little more with Caltrans and MTC. There's absolutely a commitment to monitor the performance of the ramp meters. That was 3 specific performance metrics. They don't look like they're going to be a problem to me, and we'll do our best to make sure that gets carried out.
And will this monitoring include impacts on local roads specifically? I think some people were interested in that.
Yeah, I think you heard that loud and clear this evening, and as I understand it, that is included in the monitoring that is done as soon as the project is implemented.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the commissioners on matters not on the agenda? Seeing none, we move to the Executive Director's report.
Thank you very much. I'm Diane Steinhauser, your Executive Director, and I wanted to mention that we aren't going to be having T.A.M. committee or a board meeting in December, so we will next see you in January, unless something happens, and then we'll do our best to try and assemble you. I also wanted to remind you that coming up on December 12th is T.A.M.'s holiday lunch. You should have all received, you commissioners, a notification. We would like you to RSVP. This is a pay-to-play event, and for those of you that have attended in the past, it's a lot of fun, and we welcome all of you attending again this year. You have in front of you the Executive Director's Report. My apologies for not getting this out in advance. Also attached to the back of that report is the Executive Director Activity Report, so you can see what your Executive Director's been up to the last 2 months. There's quite a bit of information in here. Just a couple of brief notes. Our community-based plans efforts in Novato and Marin City are moving along very well. We are tracking activity regarding 2 OBAG grant requirements, one for housing element approval and one for complete streets. You can read up on that. This is an open period right now for additional priority conservation areas. Let me make a note that the existing priority conservation areas have to reapply to stay on the list, and we'll be working with those individual sponsors to make sure that they reapply by the deadline of May 30th, 2015. If you hear or know of any opportunity regarding PCA, a reference to the website is here in your packet. It's an ABAG program, and we hope to both continue receiving funds and even increase the amount of funds that we will have available in the next OBAG cycle for this. We had about 2 million in candidates and had about 1.25 in funding available. And we know there's a lot of good candidates still out there. And we did a great job in Marin, by the way, of diversifying the candidates we selected. You'll see a list attached to the Executive Director's Report. We're going to have quite a bit of activity coming up in January, February, March, not least of which is a 4th cycle of Lifeline funding. We're working to get our community-based plans complete in Marin City and Novato, along with those and the one in the canal that is existing. Any projects from those plans will be eligible for these new Lifeline funds. We have about $1 million. So we've been working with the local sponsors, advising them that, you know, here's what the plans are looking like preliminarily. You need to be ready to apply for the funds. We're on a tight deadline with MTC on this. So we'll be giving you an update of what's in those plans in January, and then bringing probably back in March or April recommendations for funding projects out of those plans. There's a couple of charts on the back of your Executive Director's Report packet that refer to workshop Caltrans is holding statewide on interregional transportation funds, known as the ITIP. You'll see in my Executive Director Activity Report that I attended the CTC meeting back in October to receive $55 million plus in ITIP funds for the Marin Sonoma Narrows. It's a very important program for us. So the charts are kind of interesting. You might want to glance at those in terms of where funds come from and where funds go at the state level. I attended and had a lead role in the Focus on the Future conference, which is the 20 self-help counties around the state that have half-cent or quarter-cent or sometimes 1-cent sales taxes for transportation. You'll see a little blurb about that. Good information in here about the Caltrans. This is actually a release from CSAC that they do every year on the local streets and roads shortfall. So you can see where your communities stand in that statewide report that was just released here at the end of October. And there's a little blurb here on the federal activity, of which there is not a lot. But we're hopeful that we'll get a long-range permanent solution to infrastructure funding at the federal level, either in the lame duck, which no one's holding their breath about, or after the first of the year when the Republicans take over Congress. So we'll see where they go with that. That concludes my report, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Are there any questions?
This isn't a question. I just wanted to congratulate you and Bijan Sartibi for getting money to raise 101 above the floodplain at San Antonio Creek and give 3 more miles for the Narrows. Good job.
Fantastic. Katie?
Yeah, Diane, a question on the PCA program, just to clarify for me. So existing projects that have the PCA designation need to reapply for the next cycle, is that what you said?
Existing PCA areas.
Areas.
That are currently designated, there's 15 need to reapply, and I can definitely send you the list of exactly where they are, so you're aware of it.
Okay, and you said you'd be reaching out to those?
Yes.
Okay, and then you have the timeline articulated in your report
Right.
for getting those applications back in, but do you have a timeline on when funding might become available, or do we not know that yet?
Well, this is a subject of debate right now. We're hoping that next fiscal year, July 1st to June 30th, which would be fiscal year 15-16, MTC releases the next round of federal funds. Now, it won't be available instantly. It's most likely not going to be available until 17-18.
Okay,
But at least we'll have it to plan around, and all the CMAs are kind of asking MTC to release money sooner rather than later, so we know what we have for the future.
Okay, so, but
Yeah.
nothing's going to be
Nothing
awarded or designated, but if you want to stay in the queue, you got to keep your project current
Right.
and eligible. Okay, I got it. That's it for me.
Yes. Commissioner Kinsey?
Diane, in the report that we got from Gus Corey, he talks a little bit about cap and trade. He also talks about the idea of going for conversion of mixed flow into toll lanes. And, you know, we've had that conversation here in Marin, and Sonoma's had that conversation, and we're not particularly interested in that, at least haven't been till now. So I just wanted to bring it forward to ensure that although he's looking out for us in the context of a statewide where the opportunities are, I think it's important for us to just acknowledge that at least initially, you know, we've had that conversation and aren't particularly ready to pursue that as a source of funds in the near term. And just your thoughts on that.
Well, that's absolutely true. Managed lanes and the policies around managed lanes are a hot topic with both Caltrans and the regional agencies around the state. We're not part of the managed lane network in the Bay Area that MTC adopted. And, you know, if you remember, some of you may recall, years ago we did some traffic and revenue studies around a hot lane. But there's a long way to go on that for Marin and Sonoma. That network is expanding. It is being looked at as one way to generate revenue. So we may want to take it up in the future. I don't have any intent of bringing it to you soon.
Right. I think for the, you know, given my responsibilities to represent us at MTC, you know, I raised the question, and interestingly, in the last week, the New York Times and the Washington Post have both sort of said, wake up, Congress, add 12 cents to the sales tax on gasoline to bring it back to 1992 levels. When I raised that with the commission and executive director, he says that he doesn't envision any movement whatsoever in Congress to listen to that, that really we're seeing dwindling federal funding. At the state level, the state put all of its transportation funding priorities into cap and trade, and we are going to have a very difficult time in Marin County pursuing cap and trade funding. We've seen that the disadvantaged communities element of cap and trade, we're not even identified as an eligible community for that, and won't be for several years to come. So really the point I would be making to us is that the decisions that we've made and the decisions that have been made at a federal, state, and regional level are leaving us pretty much on our own going forward for solving and funding our transportation issues. And I wanted to bring that forward because some of the ideas that get put forth don't really make sense in our community. And although MTC is going to continue to pursue the idea of a 55% vote being what's needed to pass transportation measures. Given that transportation measures in the Bay Area did pass in Alameda County and elsewhere on the 2/3 vote, the handicapping of that possibility at the state legislature in the year ahead is very low. So it's not intended to be grim. It's intended to just focus us on the fact that if we're going to do things, we're going to have to do them for ourselves. Thank you.
Any further commissioner questions or comments? I have a note here that under the executive director's report on the agenda, you had planned to say something about the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge.
Oh, absolutely. That is an item on our agenda every month, and I'd like to defer to Commissioner Kinsey from MTC to give that report.
I was planning to speak to it when I did my
When we get
report.
to commissioners, all right, no, fine. So we will move now to the commissioner reports. There is no executive committee report since we did not meet in November. We have our SMART report.
Yes, I've included the SMART report in your packet earlier this week. You might notice that we have added another column or issue in the SMART report called Smart Talk. And we decided to do that because at the Marin Economic Forum, at the Marin Economic Forum, a commercial realtor at Cornish and Carey sent me an email saying that he had shown or was showing prospective clients different places where they wanted to move to locate their business. And they said to him, where's Smart going to stop? And as a result of that, they have picked a place near the Smart stop at Atherton Avenue because that was their first choice in the priorities of where they wanted to have their business. So we now have a new issue, a link in the in our Smart General Manager's report called Smart Talk. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them too.
Are there any questions at this time? We move on now to the MTC report from Commissioner Kinsey.
Great. Well, thank you. I'll start with the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge because it is a priority for all of us. And I want to thank Diane. She and I went and met with staff from Caltrans, including the district director and the chief deputy director, MTC staff, including the executive director of MTC. We continue to push as hard as we can to get the third lane project moving. The Richmond-San Rafael Bridge project has three components that are tied together in the near term. It's the third lane eastbound in the evening. It's changes on the Contra Costa side that are required to be able to allow the third lane to extend to the Richmond Parkway exit. And currently that shoulder is allows for pedestrians and bicycles, and so there has to be a solution to relocate them, and that is actually going to relocate them to the north side of 580. So that's the second piece. And the third piece would be to extend the Bay Trail for bikes and pedestrians across the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. All three elements have challenges that require design exceptions from the standard rules that Caltrans applies to projects. Our strategy is to try as hard as we can to develop a consensus with District 4, which is the segment of Caltrans that works in the Bay Area, and then take our package to Sacramento. We have a meeting scheduled, not scheduled, but agreed to before the end of the year with Secretary Kelly and Caltrans Director Malcolm Doherty to present the three elements of this plan and to seek their support for the kinds of design exceptions and risk management considerations, tort exceptions, to allow those projects to go forward. One of the things that continues to come up is whether the bike issues are impeding or slowing the third lane on the bridge. And the reality is they are not. That doesn't mean that the third lane goes very quickly, and I think that Diane and I, and we have an item on our agenda later tonight to try to think in advance about how we can keep the third lane moving as fast as possible by offering to address the piece related to bike pedestrian activities on Contra Costa. But if we meet in December and the Secretary says the Bay Trail can be on the bridge, that project could go forward, and it would, under the current timelines that MTC is working with, that project could actually be finished before the third lane, which is disconcerting for sure. And it functions around the substantial amount of environmental review and permitting that is going to be required in the multiple agencies that are required to be involved from BCDC onward to do projects on the bridge. What Diane and I are trying to advocate for is that they compact and overlap the design phases with the environmental review phases so that we at least reduce the timeline. So we still don't have the satisfaction of an expedited process there, but we are making headway in getting consensus around a number of the elements, and we do intend to take it to the very top at both the governor's and Caltrans structure before the end of the year. I will also say that, just so that we don't have illusions, even when that third lane is put on the bridge, the real constraint that's going to back cars up onto Highway 101 is Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. And so we still will have a challenge, although this would be an important step in helping to unclog it. It isn't going to be the answer as a whole. So beyond that, in terms of MTC this month, it has been a very active month. There also was a meeting that I attended with the executive director and Farhad Mansourian of SMART. And what we are trying to do on behalf of the City of San Rafael, SMART, Marin Transit, and Golden Gate Bridge is to get an additional $15 million to improve the transit hub in San Rafael, because if and when Larkspur, the extension to Larkspur happens on the SMART train, it eliminates the taxiway, it eliminates the shuttle buses, it impacts local transit, and it's going to create additional pedestrian safety challenges for folks having to leave the SMART station to get to the bus station by crossing a very busy thoroughfare in San Rafael. And so we are making the case that to really go to Larkspur, we need this $15 million to improve the circulation and the access to the other transit partners. And MTC is now well aware of it. That's the good news. The less good news for us, but I think is good news for SMART, is that MTC doesn't want to make any effort to find those additional funds until we confirm whether SMART gets a small starts grant, which it's pursued. If you remember, it did not get the money in the program, the national program that it had pursued under what's called the Tiger. And so we now have SMART now has an application for the same amount of money under the Small Starts program, and they anticipate being able to get a fairly clear understanding, even though they won't get a check, by February or March. And so Mr. Heminger said he would prefer to wait until then to decide what to do about this, because if it's apparent that SMART doesn't have a path to Larkspur, then the funds that have been allocated to get there, about $20 million, may be more appropriately spent in a different way. And so he's reserving judgment on that until we find out about Small Starts. In addition to that, I just very quickly I wanted to announce that we did appoint a gentleman, Charles Kaufman from Sausalito, to be on the MTC Advisory Council representing seniors. He joins with Vita Flores from Marin County, so 2 advisory council members, and I wanted to thank Charles for his interest in serving on that body. The other important preparation that we're doing right now is that the Regional Transportation Plan, the RTP as it's called, needs to be updated on a 4-year basis. So the brutal Plan Bay Area process that we're still all recovering from needs to be repeated for the year 2017. Fortunately, without the concerns around the regional housing having to be integrated within that. And so we all talked about how the public outreach, education, and engagement didn't go as it needed to go the last time around. So there's a lot of effort being focused on developing a public participation plan that really does provide folks a range of ways to engage and participate. And I just want to say that you can get to that public participation plan draft through MTC's website. The public comment period goes through the 12th of January of next year, and MTC as a commission will adopt a final participation plan at the end of February, and the process will kick off in earnest in the public in March, and it's about a 2.5-year process to adoption. So we're working hard to figure out how to make it more accessible in our own community and throughout the Bay Area. And then lastly, I did want to say that I'm pleased to see that in the year ahead, real-time information will be deployed on Golden Gate Bridge, all of its buses, in the year ahead, and we approved a marketing program to support the Bridge District for that will allow for this real-time information to be shared not only in signage at stops, but also on phone, web, sites, mobile, and texting. And I think that that is going to be a real step forward. I would just close by saying that I really think that the future of our freeways and our roadways are going to be primarily benefited by managing transportation information, because we're not in a position to build more. Thank you. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
Hello, there we go. Yeah, back on the third lane, appreciate the time and energy that you, Diane, and Steve are putting into making that move, and agree that it should be the #1 priority in terms of our energy emphasis, because it should make a significant difference. But you do mention, you said in your comments, that it's not going to be a panacea, and that we have other problems. You mentioned Easter Francis Drake. And I would add that I think we really want to understand how much improvement. We got to go forward with the third lane. We need that. And we need to understand what it's going to give us and what it's not. And I would look to my colleagues in Larkspur and Corte Madera to be thinking really hard about the problems we still have in terms of on-ramps and off-ramps. We had the Green Bay interchange discussion in that corridor. There are issues there that are never going to be helped by a third lane on the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, and they are a major cause of backup on 101 in that area. And then I do think that it is a long-term project, but we have to certainly have it getting front and center on the books, and that is that direct connection, 101 to 580 in San Rafael. But that's a decade in the making, probably, even if we started today, but it's ultimately part of the solution as well. So I just wanted to reiterate those points.
Thank you, Commissioner Rice. Commissioner Eklund, did you?
I wanted to add that I did send out the draft public participation plan that MTC published on November 7th to all the ABAG delegates and alternates. And we're going to be talking with ABAG next week on what their additional thoughts are on public participation, so we can actually have some direct input as well.
Thank you. Are there further comments or questions? Seeing none, we move now to the consent calendar. Do you want to comment on the commissioner reports? Please.
David Schoenborn, I have a question. You spoke at length about design exceptions, but none of that information has been public. Is there a reason it's been withheld?
I think the reason that it hasn't been publicly shared is that there's been an ongoing effort to, one, get a certain amount of information to understand exactly what exceptions are going to be needed, and then secondly, to try to work with District 4 to overcome their concerns to see if we could create a consensus position to take to headquarters in Sacramento. But as, by the time we have our December meeting of this body, I believe that I'll be able to speak much more specifically about which of those design exceptions we are looking for. But I can tell you in broad terms that they have to do with the use of the shoulder, how much shoulder is required, whether you can reduce the shoulder widths or in some instances eliminate shoulders. They also have to do with the design speed of the third lane as it relates to the Contra Costa landing, which is a significant concern that Caltrans has. They believe that to meet the design speeds for the roadway, that large retaining wall should be moved back, and that is so cost prohibitive that we've been, not we, I don't do this stuff, but the staff at MTC and the consultants that they've retained have been trying to build a case for a design exception. Those are two of the examples.
By not making that public and in effect having it obscure, it makes it look like the public institutions are not functioning well because it's not clear what exactly it is that you're struggling with. And so as much as you can make public, it will improve the credibility of these agencies that you're actually working towards something. Having it behind closed doors doesn't help when people are stuck in traffic and it appears superficially that nothing is being done. So the more that you can make public what it is you're working on, the more that you can get support and appreciation.
Thank you. I will take that back to the staff there.
Yes. Before we go to the next item,
Whoops, one more speaker.
Madam Chair,
Oh,
I
I'm
have
sorry.
a comment too.
Can
That's
I
okay.
just say something first, Andy? Just to the commissioners, some of these mics don't come on right away when you turn them, and I think the gentleman over there with his hand up is signaling that a mic is on. Who? Oh, the gentleman back here signals that your mic is on, so when you turn it on, just pause a second and... All right. I'm sorry, Andy. Thank you very much.
Okay, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Andy Perry, Marin County Bicycle Coalition. I wanted to comment on a couple of things that were just reported on. The first is I was at SMART yesterday with some of you, and I wanted to share a couple of the points that I made and a couple of the sort of analyses I did based on some of the documentation I got from SMART. There's 32 miles of pathway that are identified as SMART segments total. Of those, about 11 miles are either built by other agencies or have already been built. SMART has under contract to build 3.5 miles of the pathway, and there is approximately 18 miles left that are not under contract, and there's no current plans to go to construction with those. In fact, a lot of them are being environmentally evaluated under NEPA. In 2011, there was $42 million identified as the total cost for the pathway. 1/3 of that was deferred, which was $14 million, leaving $28 million left over. Yesterday, when I was at the SMART board meeting, I asked, and MCBC and Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition are both asking, of the $28 million, or using the $28 million, how is the pathway going to be built and move forward? There was never a vote by the SMART board to use that money for anything else, so the assumption that we have is that it is still available. The second thing I wanted to talk about was with respect to Bettini. I want to thank Commissioner and Supervisor Kinsey for seeking extra funds for that, and I, as I've said many times up here, am really hoping and working to try to complete the Cal Park Hill Tunnel pathway to Bettini. We're going to have hopefully a train there, but we need a bike ped facility there too, and the pathway along the train tracks is ultra sweet and a tiny fraction of the cost of what Cal Park cost. And then the final point I wanted to make is I spoke to Andy Vermeer, the head of BATA, about this issue. Dick Spotswood continues, and others in the newspaper and the letters about the pathway slowing down the third lane. And what Andy said is actually it's more likely that the third lane could slow down the pathway. And I really think that needs to be emphasized for any of you that are reading this and getting pressure. I think it's important, Steve already said this, but I think it's really important to understand that the pathway for the bikes on the upper deck is not slowing down the car lane. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any further public comment on commissioner reports? Seeing none, we move to the consent calendar. Would anyone on the commission like to take any item off the consent? Seeing none, any member of the public? Yes.
On the consent calendar, there is a contract for $75,000 to SMART, and I'm just hoping, I don't know, I didn't read the actual contract, but I'm hoping that there is some kind of timeliness factor that is incorporated into that contract. We really want to see the southern segment of the Green Bay Corridor, or the Central Marin Ferry Connection Project, from Corte Madera Creek down to Warrenham Drive move as quickly as possible. SMART is, as you know, going to be doing the surveying for that, and we want to make sure everything is accelerated as much as possible. Again, that's just a question. I know you're going to vote on this tonight, but if the contract is not signed, I hope that that is part of it. Thank you.
So we'll accept that as a comment, and I'll look for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll move consent.
A second?
Second.
Any objections? Seeing none, the consent calendar is approved. On to the Caltrans report.
Well, we had Diane Steinhauser again. I'll be just briefly referring to a report that you have at your seats that talk about several projects that are in the environmental phase, projects in design. We're completing construction and hope to have some kind of a ceremony for the Marin Sonoma Narrows projects that have been complete, including the new interchange at San Antonio Road and the new bike path that extends from Atherton Avenue all the way up to San Antonio Road. That bike path was opened on October 31st, Halloween, just less than a month ago. So stay tuned for a celebratory event for all of us, and especially the city of Novato, regarding that. A number of projects in the construction phase. A lot of these are either Marin Sonoma Narrows or what we call shop projects, which are Caltrans maintenance and rehab. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Yes, Commissioner Kinsey.
Thank you. Two items. One, I just wanted to mention on Highway 1 up in the northwest part of our county on San Antonio, where it crosses San Antonio Creek, Caltrans is planning for a bridge replacement project. I've asked our county DPW to submit comments, but I think it might be helpful for T.A.M. staff to look at or to work with DPW as well. My concern is that we're replacing a very narrow, small bridge with a proposal from Caltrans to go from a 24-foot wide bridge to a 44-foot wide bridge. And given the lack of shoulders and the rural character in that area, I'm concerned about, the impacts of that. So I'm just going to bring that to the attention of the staff and ask them to consider whether T.A.M. could also present some comments around context. And the second thing is the Golden Gate Bridge is going to be putting in its movable barrier. And in the past, when there have been projects on Bay Area bridges, we've had sort of a task force look at what the consequences would be for our traffic in our area during these bridge shutdowns. And I just wondered whether Golden Gate has worked with our T.A.M. staff and whether we have a communication plan for that, because it'll come fairly quickly after the new year. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? We move now to review and accept. Yes.
I thought I would inject, instead of another request from all of you, a little gratitude in the room. I had the opportunity to take a ride with Jeep Pandeer actually several weeks ago on the pathway, and we offered some recommendations for safety, which Caltrans did pretty much all of them, and they're going to complete all of them actually. And it's an incredibly sweet pathway. I don't prefer riding along the freeway, but it's an amazing facility, and even going down San Antonio Road, the bike lanes look really good there. So kudos to Caltrans on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more public comment? Seeing none, we move now to review and acceptance of fiscal year 13-14 financial and single audit reports. This is an action item.
I want to go back for 1 second. On the Marin-Sonoma Narrows, you elected many, many years ago to have T.A.M. do the design of the interchange at Redwood Landfill. And we were able to reduce the footprint and the cost significantly enough to afford a $6.5 million savings that went into the bike path. So I just want to congratulate us for what we did and what you did in trusting staff to take that on, and for us to be able to design and deliver that project and redirect those savings through the CTC staff and the CTC commissioners to build that path. It never would have been built otherwise. And we got the parks to agree, something Caltrans was adamantly refusing to even try. And so that's the big reason that that path is open out there.
Good point.
So,
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yes, we move on now to the financial and audit reports.
Thank you, Diane. Good evening, Commissioners. My apologies again for including the wrong report in the October board meeting package. I have to admit, we have been having many years of good results for our audit. I was getting a little too comfortable with my job. I did not take my time, review the package, and prepare for the presentation I was going to deliver to you in October. There's a note there. I will guarantee I will never make the same mistake again. So with that note, I just want to reinstate that, we do have another year of clean audit for the FY 13-14 year. And we have our auditor team manager, one of the partners from VTD here tonight, who had to drive through the worst traffic of the year, down from Palo Alto up to Marin tonight, to this time present the right numbers to you. And together we will address any questions you might have on this report.
Good evening. My name is Ahmad Garaibe. I am the partner in charge of the Transportation Authority of Marin's audit. What you have here is the annual financial statements of the authority as of June 30, 2014. The scope of the audit is to ensure that the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respect. The scope of the audit is to ensure that the numbers are reported to you on these financial statements are fairly stated. We look at these numbers, we confirm these balances, we take a look at the manner that you process cash receipts, cash disbursements. We confirm your cash accounts, we confirm your sales tax revenue with the state of California. We ensure that these numbers are fairly stated in all material respect. Pleased to let you know that these financial statements are fairly stated, and we issued a clean opinion on these statements. As part of the audit also, you are required to obtain an audit on compliance with laws and regulations, specifically federal compliance, because you are a recipient of federal grants, alongside with the some additional compliance items with respect to the Transportation Development Act. We took a look at the manner that these expenses were charged to these particular grants, ensured that these expenses were in compliance with these granting requirements. There's quite a bit of some work that we do with respect to the single audit, the federal compliance, and I'm pleased to let you know that the results of our audits indicates that the T.A.M. had complied with the requirements of the laws and regulations and with the federal and state compliance requirements. We also take a look at the internal controls. We take a look at the manner you process receipts, disbursements. We like to see segregations of functions and duties, and we're required to report to you whether we noted any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in the internal control, and we reported no deficiencies or difficulties even in the performance of the audit. Management of T.A.M. has been very cooperative in ensuring that we receive all the financial information that we needed, smoothed out the process, and ensured that we get all the numbers and all the confirmations that we were looking for. From an overall perspective, this is the annual report, so it kind of gives you a brief description, or actually it's a detailed description of all the transactions that had occurred throughout the year. The best way to look at these financial statements is in your packet. If you go in item 7, attachment 1, and I believe that's page 58 and 59, it kind of gives you a comparative presentation of the financial information between the current year and the prior year. Page 58 is a balance sheet, which is a snapshot of all your assets, all the commitments of those assets, which is what we refer to as liabilities, and the funding that is available, or the equity that is available at the end of the year. It gives a comparative information between the 2013 and the 2014. And then also on page 11 is the sources of revenues and the expenses, and how these revenues, how the revenues compare to the prior year and how they were expended for the current year. And it shows that at the end of the day, or at the end of the year, the available amounts within T.A.M, available, or net position is what they refer to, is $33 million for 2014 compared to $35 million for, $33 million for 2014 compared to $35 million compared to 2013. If you look at page 59, you're going to see interest revenue rising from about $47,000 to $200,000. That's because of the change in the investment portfolio. I believe T.A.M had changed to a new agency. Oh, I'm sorry. CalTrust, that's right. CalTrust is the new, they hold a significant portion of the investment portfolio, and therefore the interest revenue had gone up from 52 to a couple of $100,000. Again, it's we confirm these balances. We make sure that your sales tax is your biggest component of the revenue. If it had gone up, and that's because of the enhancement in the economy. Expenses pretty much remain competitive to the prior year, with the exception to Measure A projects, and that all is discretionary depending on the decision that management and the board makes as to how the funds are distributed. Again, page 10 and 11 gives a brief overview as to the significant transactions that had occurred at T.A.M. And with that, I'll be more than happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, I will open up the public comment. Are there any comments from the public? Bringing it back to us. I'm sorry, the staff report was not finished.
It is finished, so the staff recommendations for the board to accept the reports.
Thank you. And so I would like to entertain a motion to that effect. And a second? Any objections? We've accepted the financial and single audit report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we now are on agenda item number 8, Richmond San Rafael Bike Shuttle. This is an action item.
Yes, thank you. Let me also mention regarding the microphones, I was supposed to do my due diligence and warn you that if you don't have a button, your mic is on all the time, so you may be picked up on the recording that we post on the website, so do be cautious about, about talking with those mics that are on. And thanks to our crew for telling me to tell you that quite a while ago. Let me just briefly give you the kind of purpose of this item that's on the agenda. As Commissioner Kinsey mentioned earlier, in the efforts with MTC over the Richmond San Rafael Bridge, it's a complex project, not least of which is the fact that statutorily bikes can use the shoulder of Interstate 580 from the end of the bridge to the first exit in Richmond. So if we want to use that shoulder for cars, we have to accommodate those bikes. The City of Richmond and the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, our sister agency, have been thinking and talking about this for many years and developed a plan for an elaborate flyover bicycle structure that cost a pretty good amount, that they were proceeding on the planning and development of. When you authorized T.A.M to start looking at this about a year ago, we met with MTC and with our MTC commissioner and MTC's executive director, came up with an idea of replacing the bikes on the shoulder with a dedicated bike lane that wasn't part of the shoulder area. And that design has been further developed. We initiated it, MTC's completed that. And it's looking very promising that this will work, that Caltrans is finding it acceptable, and that will now be included as part of the project. And that's good news, and that was a condition of support for the lane from the Contra Costa leadership at City of Richmond and CCTA. So we've overcome that hurdle, which is great news. Those projects are going to proceed together, and as you heard Commissioner Kinsey say, there's a lot of technical studies that have to be done for adding really what in effect is a 5-mile freeway widening over the bridge and dumping a lot more traffic at a lot higher frequency into the city of Richmond. The project should proceed through the environmental approval and the design together. There is a remote possibility that because that bicycle project lies adjacent to the Chevron, who owns all of that property through that area, that Chevron may have some requirements regarding the construction of that project. So we have no firm confirmation of that. The design's still being developed. Chevron's still engaging. It appears as though the project's entirely within the right-of-way. But from my experience in working on highways for a long time, there is a possibility that Chevron could be reluctant to give the state a construction easement, could have some security requirements that take a little bit longer to negotiate and build, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm suspicious, I think, is probably the safe thing to say. There may come a moment, therefore, that we have an opportunity to split off the lane project on the bridge from the bicycle project. I have no absolute report on this, but I would like a tool in my tool chest at that time to be able to approach MTC to say, hey, can we proceed with the highway lane project on the bridge and run and operate a bike shuttle, which was run and operated by Caltrans when they did a bridge replacement of the Schofield Bridge on the other side. They had that lane closed, that shoulder closed, for over I think it was 8 months or maybe even a year. They operated a bike shuttle very successfully to replace bikes' use of the shoulder. Can we operate a bike shuttle similarly to allow the car lane project to proceed while the bike lane's being constructed? And that's really the proposal that's being brought to you this evening as a peremptory kind of a tool for me to be able to work effectively with MTC on the phasing of projects perhaps in the future. Again, right now they're together and it looks like they're going to stay together and there's no issue. I'd like to be able to offer them T.A.M.'s ability to operate a bike shuttle. We did an initial estimate. We reviewed this very carefully with Marin Transit regarding what they believe a shuttle would cost and could they operate it. We're recommending kind of I almost want to call it an intent to fund a bike shuttle if in fact there is an advantage to doing so. I'd like to bring details back to you before we actually pull the trigger, but this really is an action that is seeking your agreement that this is a good idea if in fact it's necessary in the future to accelerate the vehicular lane project over the bike project. And that concludes the report.
Thank
We're
you very much.
estimating-
Are there any commissioner questions?
It's a liberal estimate of $80,000 a year.
I'm sorry?
It's a healthy estimate of $80,000 a year for a bike shuttle. It may not need to be operated for that full period, and we have several sources of future bike funds that we could draw from.
Thank you.
That concludes the report.
Is there someone talking to my right? I thought I'd start at this end with new Commissioner Harrop. Did you want to say something?
Alternate commissioner, not that new.
Oh, but you may speak anyway.
Okay, great, appreciate that. That's nice. Just had one question, and again, I'm new to this, so please forgive me if I ask stupid questions. Is there a projection on the utilization of that service if it goes forward? How many bikes would be transported across the bridge?
Now, this is the bike lane on the east side that goes from Point Melati to the first exit, bikes that currently use the shoulder. I don't have any number to share with you there, but we do know that that Point Melati shoreline is becoming a very popular, attractive trail. And there is quite a few people that could be using that bike path. That bike path is a separated facility replacing an existing allowance on the shoulder. We also know the department's been very interested in this because a gentleman was killed in November of 2012 riding on the shoulder of Interstate 580. And they are vested in trying to replace that with a safer facility. So, no, I don't have an exact number for you, though.
Thank you. Commissioner Arnold?
Is there any, have you talked to Contra Costa Richmond about them partnering with this and helping with this interim project?
No, I have not. I could do so.
It might be a good idea, yeah.
Yes, John?
Yeah, I agree that'd be a good idea to talk to them. However, this third lane that we're talking about really benefits Marin County, so I could see, how it's basically an offer of good faith going forward. I saw in the report that, for this close to 80,000 a year, it's every half an hour or something like that, and this is a mile-long section. Does this mean the shuttle has to go all the way across the bridge to turn around?
What? No. This shuttle
It
goes
turns
a
around
very
after the-
short distance
Yeah.
from the trail coming on
Could go every
at
10
Point
minutes,
Melati
probably.
to the first exit, and so it's a
It's a
very
mile.
short trip. This is not a shuttle across the bridge because there's not currently bike service allowed on the bridge.
Yeah.
So this is really a different segment, but it was estimated, I'm going to turn here to my estimators, we would use the shoulder in the PM peak period weekdays only, roughly from 4 to 7 p.m. So the shuttle would operate on an on-call basis, at either end.
Yeah, I saw it was
path.
estimated at every half an hour.
Right,
It's
right.
probably more like every 10, 15 minutes, I'll bet they could
Right.
get back and forth on that section. Yeah, I mean, the concept as a stopgap measure really makes sense, I believe.
Yes, Commissioner Kinsey.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate Diane thinking ahead and looking out for the potential that an easement or some other time-consuming aspect would be required to install that facility on the Contra Costa side. So I think we should support this request. As it relates to asking Contra Costa if they would contribute to it, they're unequivocally clear that it's not their problem. They have a solution today that's working for them, albeit somewhat dangerous, as Diane pointed out. What they're really saying is if we want a third lane, we need to make them whole, because right now people can get to Point Melati using the shoulder and can get back to Point Richmond. So what we're really trying to do with this is to be buying an insurance policy in the event that there is a delay in that bike ped facility on the Contra Costa side. We would put this forward to say, hey, look, we're willing to solve that, but don't hold up our third lane because of it. And so for that reason, I think it is a worthwhile commitment to make.
Yes, Commissioner Rice.
I would think that Contra Costa would also have an interest in not having the third lane be held up because there's plenty of residents that are coming across the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge that will be from Contra Costa County that will be benefiting from that third lane. So I think they might actually like the idea of also having the safety net measure to keep a project on track.
Thank you. Is there any further comment from the commission? Seeing none, I open up to public comment.
David Schoenborn. I want to commend staff for doing the work of planning and looking forward into the future. Much appreciated. I support the motion.
Andy Perry, Marin County Bicycle Coalition. I also really want to express my appreciation for T.A.M.'s commitment to this important project. I really want to emphasize again, I know it's been said already, that state law prohibits closing this for cars without having an alternative. So it doesn't matter if there's 1,000 bikes or one bike, some kind of alternative plan needs to happen should these become decoupled. And I wanted to say too that if you do go forward with this tonight, I really hope, and I think the commitment's already there, but I want to state it anyway, that T.A.M. will continue to do everything it can to not allow the bike facility portion of this, Chevron or whatever, to be delayed so that we don't ever have to use the shuttle and we don't ever have to spend a dime of our funds on this. And speaking of funds, I want to express complete opposition to using TDA funds. As all of you know, all of you have bike paths in your jurisdictions. Those are the only funds available for doing maintenance of facilities. It's a pittance compared to what is needed. Places like Novato, Mill Valley, and others have huge, expensive projects that need to be done, and we're only able to do them little by little by little. And I would argue further that you could argue that we should use bike ped money because this is a bike ped facility, but it's very easy to make an alternative argument that this actually is for cars, that this is being done, not just for bikes. And so I really urge T.A.M. staff to look at other sources of funds. This $500,000 of TDA and TFCA funds that are identified in your staff report is a tiny fraction of what's needed, and bike ped money has never been more scarce, or at least not since I've been around doing this work with cap and trade money and not being available with the other state funds not being available too. So I urge that we do not use TDA funds for sure and find other funding for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further public comment? I would like to bring it back now to the commission for a motion to approve staff recommendation. Yes,
move.
I'm sorry, just a minute. There's an additional comment. I'm sorry.
I think that that was a really interesting comment about the fact that, from Andy, about whether that is the proper or the best source of those funds. So I would like to ask Diane to maybe consider if there is maybe a better source of those funds, and if we could leave it up to you to maybe consider a change there. So I'd like to make a motion to approve this with the caveat that the executive director has some leeway to determine if there needs to be a change in the source of funds from what is outlined in the staff report.
I'd second that.
Was there a second? All right, let's do it one by one. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. We move now to item number 9, extension of program project management and oversight services contract.
Yes. Good evening. I'd like to introduce Dan Cherrier, who's going to be making the staff report on this item.
Good afternoon, evening, commissioners. Yes, we are here this evening to talk about our oversight contract. This contract was originally approved at the December 2011 meeting. We used this contract to staff for workload peaks. Basically, we don't want to have T.A.M. staff high enough to handle all of our workload that may come down the pike. We also can use this contract to provide necessary expertise that we may not have in-house. And it also allows us to respond quickly to opportunities as they arise. Recently, a couple of examples of being able to respond quickly is Tennessee Valley traffic signal came on board. There was a lot of issues with traffic in Mill Valley, we were able to get right out there and do some counts to see what is happening with the traffic out there. We were also able to look at some issues associated with the Richmond Bridge that we've talked about this evening already, some noise studies associated with the Orange Avenue sound wall, basically some issues we had this last year with our crossing guard counts. We were able to respond very quickly, and a whole bunch of other items that have come up like that. We use this on-call when we don't have a project that has a real defined scope, schedule, and cost. For those projects that have a defined scope, schedule, and cost, we use the normal method of advertising and award. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the project. We were before you at the July meeting this past year to up the contract a little bit to handle some workload issues that had arisen that were unforecast because we had lost our planning manager and we needed to outsource some of that work too. So a request was made at that time to talk a little bit about where the money has been spent and where the money has come from. So I want to direct you to page 121 of the staff report, of your board package, and this outlines all of the various places we have spent the money. This contract is set up on a task order method where we have a contract manager that's responsible for the overall contract, and we have individual task order managers that manage the individual task orders, and they're responsible to make sure the money's available to go along with that particular task order. This contract itself has no source of funds. It's just a way so that when we find money available, we can issue a task order and have a team of experts perform that work. If you notice on page 121, which is attachment A of your package for this item, there are 22 task orders that have happened. We never use one of the numbers. And it shows who the task order manager is, if the task order is still ongoing, when it started, when it ended, if it has, the total authorization amount of the task order, and how much we've been invoiced. At this time, I'd like to talk a little bit about our team that we use to manage those contracts. If you go back in your packet to page 117, you'll see the scope of work that the on-call contract handles. And you can see all of those various points there, all of the bullets. It's a very broad scope. And it was done that way so that we could use this contract for things that we hadn't even envisioned might happen yet. Because like I said, we use this contract to handle issues as they arise and to provide the necessary expertise. Right under that is the members of the team. And you can see it's a broad team along with their areas of expertise. Some of the team members have left. Green Valley has left the team, and Eldridge Consulting has left the team. We've added a couple of members, Nossaman, JSP, H&TB, and continue on the next page, Mr. Nick Nguyen and Lisa Newman. Nick Nguyen, as you know, has become a T.A.M staff and has left this contract effective a couple weeks ago. I'd like to, at this point, go to attachment B, which is a fold-out attachment on page 123. This talks about the source of funds associated with those task orders we just talked about. As you can see, T.A.M has a wide variety of sources of funds. That's why it had to be on a fold-out piece of paper here. And you can see that each of the dollars that you've seen back that we've been invoiced in attachment A, we have a source of funds that the task order manager handles to make sure that those sources of funds are available. We're before you tonight because the original contract, oh, and also you'd asked for this information too. Back on page 118, I know I'm bouncing back and forth a little bit, but I'm trying to tell it to you in an orderly manner. On page 118 is the total invoices we've received from each of the members of the team. I think one of the T.A.M board members had requested that information as well. We're before you tonight because this contract, when it was awarded in December of 2011, was for 3 years. That's coming up now, but we put provisions in the contract for 2 one-year extensions. And we've been very pleased with the work of the on-call consultant. They've met our needs, and we've had no issues at all. And we're recommending that the contract be extended another year. Those provisions were in the contract that it can be extended twice for 1 year at a time. We're hoping to extend that for $900,000. That's based on previous work, and we polled all of the staff members that manage the task orders to see not only what they have left in the 2014-2015 budget, but also what they expect they may need the on-call for the first half of the 2015-2016 budget. So that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
And I would like to, testing, hello? I would like to add another very brief aspect to this, which is that, here in Marin County, we've always tried to hire local consultants and contractors if possible. We don't have a local business enterprise requirement, but we do have quite a few members on this team that are local and we're able to support their businesses. Most of them actually are small businesses, from CSW Stuber Strode to our Valley Cooper representative, Nason Nygaard representatives, Parisi and W-Trans. All of them are local businesses, and we're very proud of the fact that we've been able to set up a team that has such a high amount of local representation. So I reinforce everything my expert said and encourage you to approve the extension.
Also, I might add that Al Cornwell is here if there's any particular questions. He's from CSW Stuber Strode.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the commission? Yes, Diane.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank staff for a very well-written report. I appreciated the fact that not only did you list some bullet points of what is encompassed in the contract, but you listed the team members and what their expertise is, as well as the expenditures and the attached spreadsheets. So I just want to thank you for that. It was nice and easy to read.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments?
Echo the same. Very nice report, Dan, and I really appreciate also the spreadsheet and with the the source of funds. Really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'll note that up and down the dais, people are nodding.
Yeah.
Really.
One of the best reports I've ever seen.
With that, I'll open it to the public for comment, and if you'd like to thank the staff, that's fine. Seeing no public comment, I bring it back for a motion to authorize the executive director.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any objections? The motion passes. Thank you very much, Dan. We move now to the T.A.M board workshop follow-up.
Thank you. I would like to take this opportunity with the energy that you might have left to ask, after I give this report, for any comments you might have on the workshop. I did send out a number of questions to everyone, and as well as alternates, on what advice you might have in terms of what was good, bad, or necessary, unnecessary things to think about in the future, you can give those this evening, or you can also contact me directly. But I think it's important, and I actually think that we weren't necessarily very good at this in the two workshops that we've held previously, one in May of 2006 and the second in October of 2009. I really want to take the opportunity of this workshop to kick off some additional activity, and it's outlined in the memo that you have under item 10. Let me just touch on the three things that I'm seeking advice on as we go forward. First is the workshop. I've got a lot of compliments regarding the workshop. Thanks to all of you who put your time in on Saturday, October 25th to come, and thanks especially to the professionals that we had from each agency that were available to present and to participate in the breakout sessions. Those sessions were well thought of and very productive, I thought, in terms of getting folks up to speed with respect to detail of both what's offered in those various modal breakouts as well as what's needed by those agencies. What I'd like to do, and this has a lot to do with the MTC Regional Transportation Planning process, which is going to kick off in the spring of 2015 with a call for projects in May and some expected deadlines of the end of 2015 for us to submit our new projects for the RTP reflecting the revenue available over 20 to 25 years, is I'd like to start in January, with some, I want to call them information and education sessions to get you and up to speed and afford the public an opportunity input on these various modes that we are dealing with here in Marin. It'll be very similar to the structure of the breakout sessions. We have quite a bit of ancillary and complementary planning activity going on, whether it's the short-range transit plans of Marin Transit and Golden Gate, or the bike ped plan updates that are coming from all our local jurisdictions. I'd like to kind of expand on what we heard at the workshop in those breakouts and bring information back to you, one or two each month, so that by the time we hit our RTP process and have some public outreach associated with our future needs and revenue availability, that you're well up to speed on what's being done and what needs there are that exist. So that's one thing that I'm recommending out of the workshop. Another very useful outcome from the T.A.M board workshop was the T.A.M bucks exercise. I think one of the more interesting aspects to this was the survey, which asked folks what's good and bad, and how sometimes you got the same answers over what was good and bad, and how that shifted when you gave people just a limited amount of dollars, and where would you put your money? And we got quite a few differences under that, having to focus and limit your enthusiasm to $20. We want to take that T.A.M bucks exercise on the road, and we want to go. I do a lot of outreach to various organizations. We want to take that to them and get some additional input on priorities and bring those results back to you and start to build a cachet of public knowledge and perception over how we spend our money and, more importantly, what we should spend our future money on. So that's the second kind of thought, is to take the T.A.M bucks exercise on the road. And then I do want to explore further. This isn't quite a community, countywide, transportation planning update, but we have a lot of smaller planning efforts going on, and I want to coalesce those and maybe explore a little bit more with our Admin Finance Ledge Planning Committee in January and even into February, how best to do that. How do we coalesce all these individual planning efforts into a document, an understanding of how we should go forward? And so a little bit of planning. We're very limited on funds. We'll kind of explore options and what they cost and what your staff can do and what we might want to hire someone to assist us with. So some follow-up planning to coalesce not only what we're learning from our TAM bucks and other outreach, but also all the existing planning efforts that are going on, to just give us an updated snapshot that will update, in a soft way, I call it planning light, both our vision plan from 2003 and all the exercises we've gone through to both assign funds and plan for the future on the planning side. So those are the three elements that staff have come up with. I'd be most happy to consider other follow-up activities. And we think we can handle all of these without coming to you, except for that planning work. We're going to have to talk a little bit about funding there. But this, again, is a great stepping off point, what happened on October 25th. And we've got at least an RTP effort that we're going to have to engage in next year in late spring, summer, and maybe even more. Maybe we want to look at revenue and consider revenue options for the future also. So that concludes the report.
Thank you. Are there any comments? Yes, Commissioner Kinsey.
Thank you, Diane. I'm looking forward to all of us continuing to try and define our priorities, and especially given this limited amount of funding that we can anticipate, it's really going to be important that we decide where is the most important place to put our money. I'm just going to suggest a few other places for your stop on the trip with your T.A.M. bucks, so to speak. I think it would be interesting to offer the opportunity to the Aging Commission to play the game, so to speak, to offer the North Bay Leadership Council the opportunity, and to take it to our youth leadership folks, the Youth Commission, and begin to see if these different kind of self-interests get reflected differently. I think we can anticipate that they would, but I think it would be worth it for us. And then finally, I wonder if, and I'd be interested in my colleagues' thoughts on this, but I really wonder if at the local council level or at the city level, it would make sense to get them more apprised earlier of how the call for projects is going to come, but how they may want to have a community conversation before they just ask their DPW directors to kind of prioritize what they would want to use. So it's just something I'd be interested, whether towns and cities would be interested in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Yes, John.
Yeah, I do think that's a great idea, Steve, to bring it to various different groups as well as the different local councils. I also wanted to thank staff for putting that on. It was a really terrific and eye-opening. It was kind of nice to see the big picture in a different way than what we do parsing it along each week or each month here. One of the things that I was struck by, and I think a couple of the other commissioners also were whistle stop being a very important and crucial part to that community, was also struggling very hard to keep their costs down. And I see also some of the technology that's been developed by dynamic rideshare and how they had Whistle Stop had the most success with their volunteer program. And maybe there's some way to cross-pollinate those different programs and save some costs for Whistle Stop in there.
Yes, Stephanie.
Thank you, Diane. I had a couple of questions and a couple of comments. I wondered if you were planning to incorporate our polling data, the Godby poll, with our TAM bucks and how those two square off with each other. And I see you writing notes furiously.
Yeah, you're giving me the opportunity to say we may make some adjustments to the posters. We've very shamedly did not include the Golden Gate Regional Ferry and Bus Service. And that will be a poster. We can definitely pick up the themes that came from the poll and make sure they're reflected in the poster exercise as well, in the TAM Bucks exercise.
But what I also wondered is how the TAM Bucks prioritization might have compared with the polling data that you got when we surveyed, whether they match or not, that's all. So just a thought. And then I wondered in the staff report, I like the idea of the monthly learning sessions, and you talked about having leading experts, and I wondered, are these our sister agency
Absolutely.
Because I was going to suggest that we also bring in experts who are not from our agencies, but more thought leaders in the different areas of transportation, people that are going to challenge us to think beyond what we're currently doing incrementally to what we need to be thinking out a little farther out. So that's a suggestion I would make. Considering the MTC process, you know, Marin is different from other Bay Area counties, and so as we go through whatever their process is going to be, I think we just need to be conscious that either the questions they're asking may not be the ones that are relevant for us, or the funding that we are going to get is not going to be a whole lot. So just to go into the MTC process with our eyes wide open, that we may not be like the other counties. And then finally, I think we always have to keep the renewal of Measure A sales tax in mind as we plan it forward, that we have to start with how are we going to renew that tax in 10 years and make sure we hit whatever targets the voters are going to need us to hit. So it's a tall order, but.
Just one quick thought on that.
Yeah.
So it's not, and I can bring you supporting information on this, absolutely. It's well thought that a presidential election is the best time under a supermajority vote that we currently have for sales tax for transportation or anything specific, is the best voter, you know, that's the best election to go to. There's about 9 Bay Area agencies that are thinking about going to the poll in 2016 for transportation. Not all of them are counties. There's a couple transit operators in there as well, and we're all chit-chatting about how it's looking and what the process is in each county. We have no, obviously, commitment to do this yet, so I'm very cautious in approaching this. However, MTC has made it clear at the staff level that they intend to go to the ballot in 2018. I don't think they've gone to their commission either, so I'll defer to Steve on this, for the idea of a toll increase. So 2018 or even 2020, you know, after 2016, the next presidential election is 2020. And then after that, we've surpassed the deadline for the measure. 50% of our measure is in transit operating. It's unusual with respect to the rest of the Bay Area. It's about 38% of Marin Transit's budget. So we have to keep all this timing in mind.
Yes.
What other competition is there on the ballot? Especially with other transportation revenue measures that may come from the region or the state. That's why most counties are looking at 2016 for the opportunity to either renew or extend. Now, another unique factor in our measure is that it doesn't have a lot of capital funds in it. It has some, but not a huge amount. So to renew will probably, well, I think there'll be a lot of, my opinion, again, emphasis to keep the operating funds flowing. We don't have a lot of room for new things as a result. Over 70% of the funds, close to 80%, are for operating various aspects of various programs, including transit. So renewal is not a panacea for bringing in new things. We're going to learn a lot more about this over the next 6 months. We want to talk to you about what we have, what we don't have. One thing we didn't do at the workshop was bring in all the financial gobbledygook, and I need to bring that to you and make sure you can reflect and understand that. So just a couple of random thoughts there.
Yeah, no, and I would just say, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think renewal is essential,
Yeah.
and then adding extra, and so I'm glad to hear the thinking. We talked about passing an additional sales tax, and we should look at that, but we really need to renew the measure that we
Right,
have.
right.
So, thank you.
Are there further comments?
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner
Is this on, I
Thomas?
guess?
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
I would just add one additional group to Steve's list and yours, and that is MCCMC. I think that it might be interesting to see what collectively the other mayors, city councilmen's, how they react to this and what their thoughts are. With regard to the workshop, I thought it was quite interesting you brought the experts in to hear from them, et cetera. So I thought that was good. At the same time, I thought, gee, a T.A.M. workshop, that sounds like us getting together to talk about our vision and where we see things going, et cetera, and we really didn't have an opportunity to do so, and I think that that might be of interest and import. So those would be my suggestions. But thanks for putting that on. It's quite interesting.
Are there any further comments or questions? Yes, Commissioner Kenzie.
Thank you. I'll be brief again, but you know, since Diane was talking about 2016, I just wanted to point out that Proposition 30 expires in 2016. That was a combination of a sales tax and an income tax that was placed on the ballot. I think there's going to be tremendous pressure on the legislature to try and keep it going and fund other things, and there may be some fiscal constraint being sought by the governor, especially if we continue to see good returns to California under its current economy. I think it's worth it for us to have a conversation about where we sit with that, because in some respects, I think that if they didn't renew a state sales tax, that would open up some room for us at a local level. And it may be in our interest to advocate for giving us that choice. But under any circumstance, we should be paying attention to what is happening there. And then the last thing I would say is that I wanted to share with other commissioners earlier this year, Diane brought to us the fact that we in our county in some jurisdictions may be bumping up against our sales tax ceiling. And MTC in its legislative advocacy for the year ahead has said that it would be supporting Sonoma County and any other county that was seeking increased authorization. And so we may want to be getting our conversation going here as to whether we'd be interested in that and participating in that and allowing for a larger kind of regional effort, if that's appropriate, to at least get the authority to go with it. Thanks.
Are there any further comments or questions?
There was one other thing I meant to ask,
Yeah.
and that is reviewing the results of the, I'll call it survey. I didn't find many surprises.
Yeah.
You know, it was like the first one, what do you see as the biggest transportation problem? School-related traffic, gee, you know. But I thought from your perspective, were there any surprises?
Oh, gosh. Well, I hear about this all the time, so not really. I do want to mention that we have to be careful about expectations. And with respect to things that don't work well, how much can we really do? And I think that's part of this expert testimony that I want to bring to you from January through June. So, you know, can we really move the dial on some of these things? And how will the public perceive what it is that we're doing? Based on both past experience, some of this stuff is tough. I mean, there's a lot of money hidden in this what doesn't work well in order to make it work well. And so we got to kind of take an honest look at that. And that's my only cautionary note. I don't think there's anything missing from here. So we're capturing pretty much every option that we have on the table. With limited funds, which one do we choose, or where do we invest? And what's the solution of the moment? And so we got to be careful about that too. So anyway, that's the only thing I have to say.
Any further comments, questions? Are there any public comments?
Yes. David Schoenbrunn. I'd like to caution T.A.M. that this T.A.M. Bucks exercise actually is far less meaningful than it appears at superficially. It doesn't take any kind of wisdom to know that the public is concerned about congestion on 101. The thing that this survey purports to say is that people want to spend their money to fix that. However, there's a disconnect here. People don't understand what can and can't be accomplished. And as such, I believe that this survey or this T.A.M. Bucks exercise represents a total fantasy. On the other hand, there are actually things that can be done. The problem is that because of the emotion, this has created a political climate in Marin in which some part of the public thinks that the traffic congestion is caused by growth and therefore have become rabidly anti-housing. This is just completely off the subject or off the topic, but it has polluted the politics of this county. So the point is that the strategic priorities of T.A.M. and MTC are all based on the response to the emotion of, oh my God, congestion. And they've come up with solutions that actually will make things far worse. The EIR for Marin-Sonoma Narrows shows that by adding more capacity north of Marin, you're going to actually increase the amount of traffic in central Marin, where we just finished spending over $150 million on the gap closure. This makes no sense. And so there are issues of strategic thinking in which the transportation establishment is heading in the wrong direction. There's been a study put on by the State Transportation Agency, a review of Caltrans that says Caltrans for years now has been out of sync with state policy. The state policy is we need to reduce our climate change emissions, and Caltrans is all about building highways and increasing driving. So there's an entire strategic direction that this study did not help in any way whatsoever, and T.A.M. needs to enter into a strategic analysis of how to move forward, and I believe it will call for a severe change in direction, which would be a good thing. Thank you.
Is there further public comment? Yes, staff.
You know, I did want to mention, it's not on the agenda, that on the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, this is going to work best if traffic can get to the bridge. So we've been looking at both with the city of San Rafael, the intersection at Bellum, and also the situation of traffic on Drake. And we want to bring those discussions to you after the first of the year, kind of what we're discovering. My suspicion is that improvements there are not going to be funded by MTC, so we're going to have to figure out how to increase our participation in making that corridor workable. And then the last thing is to wish you a happy holiday and a good time off, and we'll have plenty to do after the first of the year. So,
Thank you.
anyway.
Thank you very much.
Staff says thank you to you all.
This is time for items that are not on the agenda. Would anyone like to discuss anything? We are adjourned, and happy holidays to staff and to our fellow commissioners.